Hi, I'm Patrick Thompson, Arboretum Specialist here at Auburn's Davis Arboretum.
Could you tell me a little bit about the history of the Arboretum?
Yep, and so the first land manager, Mr. Bill Reynolds, took a hog farm and shaped it up. And in the south end, he did put the dune plants and brought in a lot of sand for a lot of the coastal species. And that was about 50 years ago. But then in the 80s, they added extra acres on that end to give us a total of 14 acres roughly. And so they built an even bigger sand dune in the 80s when that was added on. And yeah, we have trees at the northern end of the Arboretum that are many decades old that are the ones from North Alabama, like the hemlocks and white pines and the large-leaf rhododendrons and things like that.
So Dr. Donald E. Davis started the Arboretum.
Correct. So Dr. Davis was a botany professor who suggested that this become a living classroom where people could learn the tree species native to Alabama. And so Mr. Reynolds and then Bob Rush spent decades building up the tree collection. And so then 20 years ago when I started, the tree collection was nearly complete, but there was still a lot of species of shrubs and, herbaceous plants from Alabama that were not represented in the collection.
Okay.
So being a plant collection, you need to collect plants to keep it new and interesting. And so the azaleas were one group that Alabama has, or at least the Southeast has more of than any other part of the U.S. So it seemed like a natural place for us to build the collection.
So who really started this specific azalea collection?
So the azaleas growing in the eastern holler over here go all the way back to the beginning of the Arboretum. And on this water course, there are naturally occurring Piedmont azaleas in the woods. So there have been azaleas here since before there was an Arboretum here.
Okay.
But the large collection that we have in the central part of the Arboretum began in 2008 when Dr. R.O. Smithman brought donation after donation after donation to us for several years.
Wow, okay.
And
so is he a professor here at Auburn?
he's a retired fisheries professor that was a geneticist, and so he worked with fish genetics, but that put him on the creeks going throughout the native habitats of Alabama, seeing a lot of azaleas reaching out over the creek and then seeing all these colors, and it was just more than he could handle to not be able to classify them cleanly. So he brought them into his own garden, began hybridizing them and observing the traits as a trained scientist and geneticist, the result of which was a wide spectrum of colors. Exactly. And so he donated it to us, but it was his own curiosity that led him to build a personal collection and then wanted to share it with the Auburn family. And they then worked towards beautiful plants like the Auburn azaleas that are bright Auburn orange, they're heat tolerant, they bloom later in the season. And so it was when he got connections in the gardening community that his scientific inquiries moved more in that landscape direction. But the results were beautiful, and so we're glad to be able to share those.
That's amazing. Yes. So can you tell me a little bit about just like the expanse of the azalea collection here?
Okay, so the way the Arboretum's azalea collection is laid out in our space is with a central core collection that includes our Alabama azaleas. Right now we're standing in between the Florida hybrids.
Okay.
And then there's several other hybrid groups that kind of mesh into the native hybrids, which is large groups of naturally occurring hybrids.
Okay.
And then separated out from this garden, we have the other species. So the Oconee azalea is completely separated, so you don't confuse that with these hybrids.
Okay.
The Piedmont azalea is again in its own separate bed. Same thing with the Cumberland azalea. We have the Florida azalea down in the southern part of the Arboretum because it is a southern azalea. That's right. And so by separating our labeled species from the display collection, hopefully will help people not get so confused about the diversity you see in the colors in the species.
Absolutely.
Because even within a species, the color can range from white to pink to yellow, so to orange. So it's really challenging to tell these apart. So we hope to be a collection where someone could come and observe the variation within the species and across the genus. And so we tried to represent all of the species that occur naturally in the Southeast.
So can you tell us a little bit about azaleas just in general?
Okay, so there's more than 1,000 species of azaleas. The heart of the diversity is in Southeast Asia, and the average azalea is going to be an evergreen shrub about the size of a person, 4 to 6 feet tall.
Okay.
But there's some that are deciduous, that lose their leaves in the winter, and those are the ones that are most common in Alabama and that we have more of in Alabama than anywhere else in the world.
So is this one of the largest azalea collections?
This is one of the best documented azalea collections. And so there are other wonderful collections of azaleas throughout the Southeast even that have more individuals. But a lot of them are there for display, and they're wonderful aesthetic collections. But the database that we have and the records that we keep allow our plants to have the aesthetic value, the education value, as well as conservation and research value. And so it's the effort to maintain those records that give it that added value.
So,
Okay.
Southern biodiversity.
So Southern biodiversity is, in my opinion, second to none. I mean, there's a lot of things that we are, without a doubt, the world capital of.
Wow.
And deciduous azaleas is one of those things. There are more types of deciduous azaleas in the southeastern U.S. than anywhere in the world. And as far as within the United States, it's a little bit easier to measure, but Alabama has, more types of freshwater fish, more types of turtles, more types of clams and shells.
Wow.
And all that stuff adds up to being number one in freshwater biodiversity. And so the animals have been pretty well documented.
Okay.
The plants, there's still work going on.
What is one thing you want people to know about the Arboretum?
I think people should know that the Arboretum is constantly changing. And so with the native azaleas, we're usually in bloom from February to November. You can find a native azalea blooming most of the months of the year. Right. And so if you think about the typical landscape azaleas, they open up, they bloom right now in March and April, and then it fizzles out. If you're really into the evergreens, then maybe you've got the Satsuki azaleas that'll go into May. But after that, you're out until those encores come on for a month in the fall. But the native azaleas are here month after month, providing a nectar source for those swallowtail butterflies, providing habitat for all types of birds, insects, and small mammals, because they can be pretty thick, bushy plants. And Arboretum's always changing. So yeah, people should come more than just in the springtime.